Good evening. And we'll call this meeting to order. And as always, we'll begin the evening with a moment of silence where you can enjoy a moment of silence, pray, or meditate to yourself. If you'll join me in that now, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. If y'all join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, and we have a couple presentations this evening. We'll start with the proclamations. So we have two proclamations, one for Week of the Young Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month, Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month, I'll read both proclamations. Then we have some folks from Safe Light and the Children and Family Resource Center. If you guys want to come up, and I'll present you with the proclamations after I read them. So just hang on this. In the proclamation, Week of the Young Child states, whereas the first years of a child's life are the period of the most rapid brain development and lay the foundation for all future learning, whereas high-quality early childhood programs provide important benefits to children, families, and our local, state, and national economies, whereas high-quality early childhood education depends on high-quality early childhood educators who ensure that children supported by families have early experiences they need for a strong foundation, whereas the essential yet chronically undervalued child care sector has sacrificed and struggled to serve children and families since the start of the COVID pandemic, whereas young children need skilled, educated, competent, consistent, and compensated early childhood educators, whereas working families need sufficient high-quality child care spaces beginning at birth to be available in the community, whereas Smart Start Partnership for Children, Children Family Resource Center, and other child-serving agencies are collaborating for public attention to improve opportunities for our children and their families. Now, therefore, I, Preston Blakely, Mayor of the Town of Fletcher, do hereby proclaim April 1st through April 7th to be the Week of the Young Child. And I'll read the other one. And this proclamation is for Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas child abuse can cause long-term psychological, emotional, and physical harm that has lasting consequences for survivors and their families. Whereas we value our vulnerable children as vital to our state's future success, prosperity, and quality of life. Whereas child abuse and neglect is a serious problem affecting every segment of our community, as well as both the current and future quality of life of our community. Whereas all children deserve to have the safe, stable, nurturing homes and communities to foster healthy growth and development. Whereas communities that provide parents with social support, knowledge of parenting and child development, and the concrete resources they need to cope with stress and nurture their children are able to foster all children growing to their full potential. Whereas effective child abuse prevention strategies succeed because partnerships created among citizens, human service agencies, schools, faith communities, healthcare providers, civic organization, law enforcement agencies, and the business community, whereas Safe Light and other young youth agencies of Henderson County are collaborating for public attention to focus on child abuse and ways to improve opportunities for our children and their families. Now, therefore, I, Preston Blakely, Mayor of the Town of Fletcher, proclaim the month of April 2023 to be Child Abuse Prevention Month. And you all can come forward. Thank you all.
Didn't have to read all that.
We got it out. Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate it all. Thank you. Okay, our next presentation is of life-saving awards to the 3 officers by Chief Terry. Chief Terry, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Certainly a pleasure to be here. You know that I have to stand before you for various reasons, but none is better than what we're here to do tonight, as to celebrate and award three of our officers for some fine work they did, what we call a life-saving award. So I'm going to ask Sergeant Josh Kilby to stand. I'm going to ask Officer Interlicia to stand. I'm going to ask Officer Isaiah Dwyer to stand as well, as I go ahead and read this to you. This is a life-saving award for each of them. On January 28th, 2023, Sergeant Kilby, Officer Dwyer, and Officer Interlicia responded to Billmore Fletcher Park for an unknown problem. It was reported a male was lying on the ground unresponsive. All three officers arrived and immediately provided necessary assistance to the victim, who was found to be unconscious, not breathing, and without a pulse. A passerby was found to be performing CPR on the victim. Officers took over the CPR. The victim's condition was assessed and findings were reported to the EMS personnel upon their arrival. Additional assistance was provided to EMS personnel in the form of providing ongoing breaths for their continued CPR efforts. The officer's assistance to EMS and the fire personnel continued inside the ambulance. The victim regained a pulse and started breathing again. He was transported to Pardee Hospital, where he continued to recover from a heart attack. It has been reported that the likelihood of victim surviving without the intervention and CPR provided by these officers was minimal. This is not the first time these officers have been observed to render such aid under stressful conditions when a person's life is on the line. They should be recognized for their ongoing commitment to serving the community, their quick response, their knowledge and skills, and the life-saving measures they took to mitigate a potential life-threatening event. So I ask everybody here to join me in congratulating these three for this well-deserved life-saving event. That individual who went down in the park that day is among us. Mr. Herbert Blake is in our presence, and he would like to say a few things here in just a second. But Herbert is somebody that I know personally. I don't know him well, but in the 6 years that I've been here in this great state of North Carolina, he's been good to me, and he's treated me well and been kind. And so I personally am grateful to these three for their service and the efforts they took to get there, take care of business, and did what they did. And so I again, personally thank them. Mr. Blake?
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Terry. And I just wanted to personally thank the officers. He didn't make this up. He probably left some of it out. But I did not know what happened to me other than I woke up in Pardee having to have 2 stents placed in my body. And the doctor that performed the surgery said my event was what's considered a widowmaker. You typically do not survive that event. So I too am deeply appreciative of what these guys did. They didn't have to do it, but they did it and they stayed with me. They brought me back. Today, April 10th, is my birthday. And it is the best birthday I've ever had in my life. Because I was gone and they brought me back not knowing who I was. And if you don't know, I'm the former police chief in Hendersonville. Now I'm the chief deputy at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. But they didn't know, they didn't care. They did what they had to do. And it's a reflection of the chief, the sergeant, the town's leadership, that you've got public servants like these guys who go above and beyond. And I am forever grateful for what they did for me. So I just wanted to say that as quickly as I can. And I'll just shake their hands. But thank you for recognizing them. Thank you for recognizing them.
And I just want to second, thank you guys before you walk out. I see y'all running, but thank you guys truly. Obviously, you're lifesavers. The work that you all do for our community is invaluable because you're truly saving lives. every single day. And I've got to know Chief Blake for a number of years now. He's a friend of mine as well. So I certainly appreciate that he's here today. Happy birthday to you, and thank you to you all.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate all of
Thank
you.
all of you.
All righty, we'll keep on moving our agenda. We should have a short night. We'll move into public comment. First signed up is Mr. Steve Watkins. You know the drill. Say your name, your address, and then your 3 minutes will begin when the clerk is ready.
Okay, Steve Watkins, 200 Windsor Forest Circle, Fletcher. To be brief, it's to, about the resolution that's come up. This is really to support that, to give you an example of why it's needed. Let's see. Last week, evening of 4/6, early morning of 4/7, there was a car wreck on Fanning Bridge, knocked out the power. Later on that night, power company's in, they have Fanning Bridge road blocked. At 3 a.m., semi-tractor comes, got nowhere to go. Fletcher police, I don't know, my daughter who watched the events on her window, took forever for him to do a three-point turn because he was just west of the Fanning Bridge entrance. So it sets what we've been trying to say, there is no place for those tractors and trailers. 3 a.m., had nowhere to go, took them forever for for our police department to get them squared away. So I just want to provide that answer, that example of why the resolution is necessary. Appreciate you guys trying to do what we can.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. All right, next person signed up is Mr. Dennis Justice. I know you know the drill as well, so just name, address, and then your 3 minutes will begin when the clerk's ready.
I'm Dennis Justice. I live in Hoopers Creek area. First of all, I want to apologize. I was not here last month. I've been rehired at Amazon as a driver, and I'm simply not available on Mondays. So I was not here to approve the multi-court surfacing at Billmore Park. I know you have an item on the consent agenda, so you won't talk about it much. I was hoping to thank Mr. Walker personally. I just want to give my appreciation to you and the Fletcher Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for going forward with these courts. As you know, I've been an advocate for infrastructure recreation for some time here. I remember playing disc golf after Mr. Crooks had donated $5,000. Used to be something I used to do all the time. I worked nights a long, long time ago. And also that kept me a little thinner than I am right now. I sent an email to Mr. Walker asking for a layout because there's people in the municipal community that are very interested in this project and to get a timeline. I frame everything in terms of an audition. As I stated before, I don't want the actual pickleball community to hijack these courts. I want us to have an honest evaluation of how much the Fletcher community and the community in the immediate area uses those courts. I'm not saying that the actual community cannot schedule a tournament too once in a while. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a great demand. A year from now, with the legislation that's going to come up in Raleigh, you may be able, seriously, to be able to bet on pickleball matches on your phone. If you think that's inconceivable, in Colorado, table tennis was a big thing to bet on during the height of the pandemic. You still get something like 1.5% of handle in Colorado. It's Rule 514. If there is a competition, someone wants to wager on it, no exceptions. There is a growing demand. I don't want us to overbuild. I want us to get an evaluation, and I hope my son is very interested in the basketball court that's coming because, as you may know, I take my son to the activity center on South Grove Street a lot, and I really wish we had an activity center in this area that's for public use for my son and for everyone. We have a lot of opportunities to grow in this area. in terms of recreation. And so, again, I'm very grateful for these courts. I hope if there's success, we can look at the expansion. I hope we can look at a roof. I drove by the basketball courts next to the Boys and Girls Club at 1 in the afternoon a few days ago, and there was someone shooting hoops then because they had that roof. And I've seen a community event that was held last summer, even though it rained, because they had that roof. And there's different ways to do it that don't require that much cost. But again, I want to give thanks again, and I look forward to playing on these courts.
We thank you. That's everybody we have signed up for public comment, but is there anybody else that wishes to speak before we move on? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 1, the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes presented in your agenda packets? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to council updates, if there are any.
I just wanted to mention for anybody who wasn't here last week, when I first talked about it, the Department of Transportation had dropped 2 projects off of their list of projects to work, completely off their list. That was the widening of Sweeten Creek Road and redesigning of the interchange at US 64 and Four Seasons Boulevard. And in the meantime, the local advisory boards, which I sit on 2 of them, one in Henderson County and one for the region here, that didn't sit too well with a bunch of us. So what we've done is we have swapped some projects out for Hendersonville Road, the US 64 interchange. We've requested that they go ahead and work that one, and the project that we swapped out was widening of Canoga Road. We thought the interchange was more important to the community. And in Buncombe County, that project to make Sweeten Creek Road 4 lanes has gotten up to, I think when they were first talking about it, it was like $20 million, and now it's up to like $54 million. And there just is not enough money to do the whole project. So what we settled on was swapping out a widening project on Leicester Highway. And the money from that project is going to be used on Sweeten Creek Road to make it 4 lanes, from where it's 4 lanes now, all the way to Mills Gap Road. And then the other part will have to come at some later time, but at least that'll get the traffic down to an intersection where people will have an option to turn right and turn left. DOT in the state of North Carolina is hurting right now with money. They're losing money. People aren't driving as many miles. People are driving more efficient cars. They're using less gasoline, and their biggest income is the tax off of gasoline. They're still trying to figure that out. But I just thought I'd let you know about those 2 projects. Hopefully the DOT will approve the recommendation of the local boards and go ahead and work those 2 projects.
Thank you. Any other updates from council?
Baseball started tonight at Fletcher Field, and our mayor got to throw out the first pitch, so it's officially on.
Yes. Yes, that's why I put my hand on my face and said, Keith, why'd you bring that up? I'm not ashamed. I'm a little embarrassed today to make it to the home plate, but I did it.
It did good.
It did good, that's right. Do we have any other updates? All righty, moving on to the consent agenda. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns regarding anything on the consent agenda?
I make a motion we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. And very quick meeting. Moving on to your comments, Mr. Manager.
I think this is record setting.
I think so.
So I guess just to touch on pretty much everything I mentioned last week, and not much change other than maybe the last item. But so the Polco citizen survey was completed last month, and we got the official results on the 24th. I talked to you a little bit about some of the highlights last week, but as far as next steps, we'll want to post some information on our website, social media, so Facebook, and then I'll do a follow-up report for the May meeting where I can hit a little bit more on some of the highlights, and if there's any follow-up or next steps or things that you want to consider in light of the feedback that we received. So it's a good comprehensive report, but it's a lot of information to go through. And thank you to our residents who took the time to fill it out. We had a decent response for a written survey that's long. So there's quite a few people out there that took the time to do that. So obviously, I think y'all value that feedback. So, and may do a subsequent one in the not too distant future to see how things have changed or stayed the same or improved. So that'll be kind of next steps on the citizen survey. And the next thing was I mentioned about the noise complaints from I-26. So we've had requests from residents, particularly Wildwood neighborhood, about revisiting sound walls. We're gathering comments, feedback. I shared with you kind of like a chart or spreadsheet that Susan Hefner in our office have put together. She works on the newsletter, and so we put together an article kind of asking for feedback from the public. So if there's any other steps you want us to do to kind of gather that, we're willing to do that. But at this point, I would share that information with our legislators and also with DOT so that this stays on their radar to kind of take a next step or swing at this to get them to revisit looking at sound walls there.
It might be helpful to forward that information to our legislative delegation as well.
Yeah, I'll probably just this week send it to them so they have it in DOT rather than wait for any more. And as we get other comments of
Since we've already
substance, we can
discussed
do it.
this with Chuck McGreedy, why don't you add him to that list?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. Okay.
Have we
So
received
that's-
any more Sorry, Mark. Have we received any more feedback from the community since last Monday?
No.
Saying,
I mean, not that I'm aware of. I'll
Yeah.
double check with Susan, Candy. I mean, they're the ones primarily answering the phone if
Okay.
someone calls in. Susan, that info line email that we
Mhm.
have, you can just email about anything. She monitors that, so I can check. She usually forwards something if I need to see it to me. But so we'll check on that and then send it to those folks. I mentioned last week the gateway sign, so we had budgeted a second gateway sign to be put up at the south end of town on Highway 25. So it went through a bidding process, and Custom Wood Designs, who is also the one who did the sign going into the park, and then our other gateway sign at the north end on 25 in front of First Citizens. They were the low bid, and they'll be doing a sign very similar to the one at the north end to be put up here on 25. It'll be kind of not far from Southern Concrete, and we think it's in a good visible location. So they're marking the spot right now where it's going to actually go in, and then
Is it in a place where we could have lights on or no?
we're not sure about that. So if we can pull power and it's not too crazy expensive to do it, we'll look at doing that because that would be nice to have there. We did not, well, it's under budget. I think between the, we had to get a brick mason or someone to do
Right.
the piers
Rock
or
work.
columns, the rock work on each side, and the actual sign. I think it put us at about $9,000.
and I think I had budgeted 12,000, so we're under budget, but we'll look and see if that's a possibility on lighting out there. So that's, I don't have a timeline exactly right now when it would be going up, but that we just sprayed for utilities, for digging. So probably in the next month, you'll see activity out there. So that's on the Gateway side. I know we talked about our meeting with the state legislative delegation that we had back on the 24th. We just had Senator Moffitt there, Representative Bauckham could not make it, but we shared our legislative priorities, a list of some specific projects that they would consider for funding, and then also talked about the noise issues that are, impacting our residents along I-26 from the project. So the sound wall discussion, which they're aware of. Next thing I wanted to mention, there've been interest on consideration of satellite annexation of the Wilderness campus, or the second campus of Fernleaf, and the administrator there, Michael Luplow, had called me and wanted to kind of just delay request for annexation consideration. So that may come back at some point.
Do you know if they got any more information on the resource officer component there?
At this, I'm not aware if they have received anything more. And if they do and they're able to iron out how that would happen, or at least know, then I guess my understanding is that you probably want to bring it back for consideration. But, really right now, if you did annex them in, and it's a satellite annexation, probably it would be primarily law enforcement services. Because that type of a use wouldn't really get other types of town of Fletcher services that we currently provide. Might be some partnership with Parks and Rec stuff. That would be maybe the only other level in there. But when he does, and if he does and comes back, I'll let you all know. We can put him back on there. The next thing I wanted to mention, so our town center project and traffic impact analysis, we have our official letter back from DOT. It's nothing really different than the mitigation improvements that I've mentioned, and they're not, at least in our thought process and some of the feedback from our former developer or the engineer for the developer, fairly reasonable. Now, we don't know what the price tag they're going to put on it and what that's all going to cost. So that's kind of the next step, is sitting down with DOT and going over those and what the expectation would be from the town or the developer to do that, or some combination, and getting them back at the table. So, but good news is they whittled that down to much more focused improvements that are close to where the project area is between Fanning Bridge and Howard Gap on 25. So they're much more reasonable. And we discussed that a little bit with Senator Moffitt when we had him in that meeting a couple weeks ago. So I reached back out to to Will Bowie, who is the engineer representing the former developer team, and they're still interested. He was going to go back with their comments. It was last week I talked to him and see kind of their reaction. And then next thing is to sit down with DOT and see if we can get them back to the table, all the parties. So that's moving along. And really the last thing I just wanted to mention was just questions on any of this. Of course, our pill drop and document shredding event is going to be this Saturday from 9 to noon in the south parking lot, so our bigger parking lot below. And we're also going to add, it's going to be a little tricky trying to advertise all this because it's a lot of different things. We've got the medication turn-in, the pill drop. We got the shredding event. That's all taking place in the parking lot on the south side of the building. But all the mulch that was just shredded or mulched up. We had just kind of the raw piles, and they had to bring a chipper in to shred it, to chip that down. So that's in a nice mulch pile, but it's always a trick trying to get the public or anyone to come and take it off our hands. Sometimes they do, but one of the other challenges is people want to get it, but they don't have a way to load it there. So Public Works will be available this Saturday as well. So we're going to have to advertise that or get the word out. So if you know of anyone who's interested in mulch, I mean, they can come get it any time, but we're going to have them out there with some equipment to help load it, because that's one of always the biggest challenges that we hear from people. So that'll be happening Saturday as well.
So you're
I just
gonna
wanna
do
let you know.
another call?
Oh, yeah, yeah, we might need to do a couple, and one, maybe one talking about the mulch available and assistance loading it, and then the other about the shred and hill drive.
I was gonna
because
suggest, if you do them all in one, right up
That's
front, you should
a
say,
lot.
we've got information pertaining to a pill drop, a document shred event, and a mulch event, and then you can explain the details. Because if you don't tell them right up front what's in there, they'll never listen to the back end of your message.
I almost think we might need to do two, because
That's probably
it's, you try, the calls need to be no more than a minute. And a minute can be a long time when you're, you know how it is, you get all these calls, and if you're interested, a minute's about the max. You're gonna get someone's attention if they have any interest in listening to the message. So, that's why I might break it into two calls, but, you can only get so much detail in there at that time. And that's really all I had at this point.
Okay, any questions from Mort? Is there any other business that council wants to bring to the table? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
Second?
A motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjourning say aye. Aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned in record time.